The Celestial Saint is back and way better than ever. Despite the nerfs to Aftercuts, I have improved upon the version 1 in all categories, giving you more offense with more consistent and potent buffs, faster mobility which allowed me to clear Chaser in under 4 minutes while messing up against the Bonekeeper, and more defense, stacking 50% damage reduction and plus 132 HP, which is wild. Not to mention, I do all of this while still allowing the build to be incredibly easy to play. But before we start, I want to answer a very commonly asked question when I post new builds. How does this compare to another build? I'll try to cover this in 30 seconds. Here's a quick diagram on screen. There'll be a full video on this topic soon. So modern PvEs can broadly fall into one of 3 categories: Hell Mode, Diluvian, and Bosses. A build like Seraph Soul is incredibly good for the Diluvian because it has good offense and defense, but not so good for Hell Mode because you need mobility to escape other players. The Dawnbreaker would fall in between a Hell Mode and a Diluvian build, and the Godslayer version 6 is a pure boss build, and is still the best boss build in the game, however it's really hard to play. If you're wondering, the Center would be a true generalist build. It's literally impossible for a build to be good at everything. The PvE community has been trying to solve this for years. However, the Tempest Tyrant 2.1 is the closest you can get. You can't do Maestro, and its times are okay on all the bosses. But the Celestial Saint V2 falls in between a boss and a Hell Mode build. So this means while it isn't as good as something like the Godslayer version 6, you still get phenomenal times against bosses, and you're tanky and mobile enough to do Hell Mode. This build would be able to do Diluvian, but you would need a teammate or two. Okay, I don't think that was 30 seconds, but I think you get the point as to where this build falls in comparison to all my others. Obviously, what I just said doesn't take into account how much easier the Celestial Saint is to master. I'll explain more when the actual dedicated video drops. Anyways, today we are covering the stat order to the build, progression tips, and finally how to master it. So make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, because I am so close to 100k and I want to see if we can hit it before the new year. And of course, join the Discord for the build maker link. So let's get into how to make the build. You can go any race for the Celestial Saint V2, but Vesperian is the most optimal. The only thing that's going to change is you get a little bit less weapon at the end. Your Oath is going to be Chain Warden for the mantra slots. Origin can be anything, but Deep Bound is the best. And your outfit, you're either going to want a Prophet's Cloak for more mantra pen, or you're going to want Ignition Deep Delver for the resistances. And your Bell is going to be Crazy slots, as the weapons have the highest base damage in the game. Now on the starting screen, you're going to want to start with 10 Flame Charm when you spawn in. We'll unlock the other achievements later. Now you'll initially get to 20 Willpower, followed by getting to 15 Strength on the build. At this point, you'll have a Flame Mantra, so you'll train your Flame Charm up to 40 points, and then get to 50 in your Fortitude, 30 in Strength, and then finally 40 in Willpower. But you need to make sure that you stop investing points before you hit Power 10. So depending on your race, you'll now invest 1 point into Charisma, 1 point into Agility, and 1 point into Heavy Weapon. Again, some races may hit Power 10 now, so in those cases you just don't invest some of these points. You'll see why in a second. So you'll be going to the overworld to unlock Frost Draw and Gale Breath. We'll be unlocking Shadow when we go back to Depths. In the overworld, you also want to do the 3 extra talent hands just to make the pre-shrine of this build a lot more consistent. But the main thing is you need to kill Kaido for the Ardor Scream talent, as this talent provides you 25% more damage and 15% more posture damage. It's one of, if not the best PvE talents in the game. Killing Kaido isn't too hard, as you can just do what I did, spawn him on another slot, weaken him, and then hop back to the slot that needs Ardor. You can get a friend, or you can just buy a carry from a Discord like PvE Hub. I'll leave the link to it in the description. But once you've got Ardor, you're free to invest all the points you want. But since we're just below Power 10 on Vesperian, I'm just going to invest 2 more points into Agility to hit Power 10, giving us all the cards we need. At this point, you'll go to Depths and get your Shadow Cast, and then you can finally Shrine of Order. These should be your post-shrine stats. I believe they look exactly the same on races like Etrian. So now you'll start by getting 20 Shadowcast, 20 Frost Draw, 20 Gale Breath, just for the sake of getting the mantras early, then 25 Charisma, 25 Agility. Now you'll get all the way up to 80 Gale Breath on the build. Realistically, you'll probably stop at 75, just because you need to unbound it. Then you get to 75 Heavy Weapon, unbound both Heavy Weapon and Gale Breath to a boss at the same time. Then you can get to 80, and then put the rest of your points into Heavy Weapon. On Vesperian, you get 93 at the end, but depending on your races, it can be between the high 80s and the low 90s. For your traits, I personally chose to do 6 Proficiency and 6 Vitality on the build. This config still let me shred through Broodlords and 1 Cycle Chaser on the build. However, if you want even more offense, then you put 6 points into Song Chant. It's up to how you want to play though. Now let's go over the talents. So first, we'll get Conditioned Rider on this build. It's a very good talent for passively regenerating and makes Atheron a complete breeze. Then we'll get Wyvern's Claw, more damage on uppercut. Carnivore to never have to worry about hunger. Rending Impact, this pairs very well with Bulldozer, allowing you to stun Chaser for longer. Risky Moves makes dodging Atheron's ult even easier. Fishman for health, Exoskeleton to the finish for damage reduction. Neuroplasticity for the extra mantra slot. Thresher Claws for pen. Lose Your Mind, this doesn't proc all the time, but if you're fighting something that makes you insane, or have an insanity downside corrupt bell, it will proc. Get Bulldozer, this pairs with the Rending Impact tech I just talked about. Blood Iron Spirit and Scuba Drowner are 10 HP, and Speed Demon is a massive damage buff. Pickoff and Time to Go for mobility. Suffocating Impact, deal more damage to things on guard break. Flame Within for damage, you'll want this because it procs Charged Return. Grand Feast, I don't need to explain that. Giant Slayer and Tough Love for more damage multipliers. Heavy Hitter for humanoids. Charge Return, this is proc by Flame Within. It's one of the best pairings in the game. Cauterized Wounds is just less blood loss, might as well take that. You'll unbound Gale Breath for free, giving you 15 HP. Inhale and Aftercut for more damage. You want to remember to inhale on this build as much as possible. Immolation, this just makes Flame Within deal less damage to you, therefore you can keep it active for longer. Windstep for mobility. Last Resort for a damage buff when you're low. Old Habits and Breathing for 10 HP. Berserker, this is a really strong talent for stuff like Ceramid Hollow or Hell Mode, because you get 20% damage resistance when you knock an enemy. That's crazy. Now you'll get Replenishing Knockout and Ready or Not, Armor Conserver, Steel Scales and Padded Armor, Pocket Bombs for a little bit more HP if you want to do the quest, which is pretty easy. Now you'll get the full Spectre Tree, as well as Haunted Gale. Then you'll get Cap Artist. This just allows you to Wave Dash in Layer 2. You'll get Flaming Flourish, then you can Grip Chaser as long as you flourish at the end. And finally, you're going to get Warrior's Swing. It makes you take 20% less damage while you have Hyper Armor. So that's in pretty much all heavy weapon crits. Now I'm just going to add on all the quest talents that you can easily get on the build. You can actually get Wind Waker on this build, but I wouldn't recommend it as it just takes way too long. Coming over to the mantras, we're going to start off by getting Gale Lunge. This pairs really well with Glacial Arc, allowing you to ascend fast. Tornado for good damage. Plus, you can set this up away from monsters and force it to slam into them at the same time as you're using an M1. Heavenly Wind to Wave Dash. Gale Punch, Twisted Kicks, and Astral Wind for more DPS. Some of you may wonder why not get Updraft on the build. Well, that's only really good for Hell Mode and Diluvian in my opinion, whereas Gale Punch, the thing that it would replace, is a high multi-hit mantra with a big hitbox, so it allows you to build chain stacks against bosses faster. Personally, I prefer Gale Punch over Updraft, but if you just sacrifice a talent on this build, then you can get both and just swap them out depending on what you're doing. For mobility mantras, you'll just be running Glacial Arc and Wind Passage. These two just give you insane mobility and make you be able to clear Layer 2 significantly easier. We actually get a lot of support mantras on this build. We get Shade Devour and Taunt for your damage. These two just work really well and buff your damage by an insane amount. And you'll also have Reinforce. You will notice this gets you over the mantra limit, however you'll just swap out Heavenly Wind for Reinforce if you're doing something like Hell Mode or Diluvian where you don't need the ability to Wave Dash. damage. As you can see, there is some spare talents on the build, so you can either sub in talents you want, or sub in stuff like Updraft if you feel like using it. If you're wondering, you'd sub in Updraft for Gale Lunge in this scenario. Now coming over to the weapon, obviously your main weapon is going to be a Divine Great Axe, because that gives you the most damage, especially with a good kit on. But while you're not using crazy slots, you're going to want an Enforcer's Axe. Obviously 3-star damage, this just gives you insane DPS, and you're going to want it with Astral. However, just because the damage multiplier is bugged on Buildmaker, I'm using Grim as a substitute, but get Astral in game. For your rings, you equip a Ishin's Ring, Willpower Ring, Charisma Ring, and a Strength Ring. While you obviously aren't proccing all of these damage mods constantly, since we just have so many damage multipliers, it is viable to equip a Ring of Casters to make your Gale mantra stronger, although that's really up to you. Looking at the summary, we get a massive plus 132 HP on this build, which means this build is almost as tanky as some Diluvian builds, while still being able to one-cycle Chaser in under 4 minutes. So yeah, if you're a casual PvE player looking for an easy-to-use build that gives you good performance, this is definitely the build for you. Anyways, now that you know how to make this build, let's get into how to master it. There is only a couple of things you've got to keep in mind while using this build. Against bosses, you've got to remember to make sure that you're popping your buffs. So Shade Devour and Flame Within before you start attacking, as well as inhaling repeatedly to keep the speed boost and proc Speed Demon. Keeping up your debuffs like Ardor Scream and Taunt can also result in you gaining 55% more damage against your target, so those are very important to keep in mind. But the main thing is, you need to make sure that you're perfect casting your mantras. How you do this is to M1, and right after the M1 lands, you use something like Gale Punch or Twisted Kicks. There isn't an order that you need to use mantras in, just save something like Tornado for inhaling, or use it after an uppercut, or there is actually a tech where you can spawn Tornado away from the enemy, that way when you actually attack them, Tornado slams into them, allowing you to pseudo move stack. But as a whole, this build is very intuitive to learn. The only difficult part is wave dashing, but as long as you activate Cap Artist at the right time, you'll learn it pretty quick. Good luck with this build, I know you'll get some great times with it. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe, and join the Discord with the Buildmaker link. I have a bunch of cool PvEs on the way, so you won't want to miss them. Anyways, check out some more PvE content, and I'll see you all next time.